All right, good morning, AP Government. Sorry that I am unable to be there with you today, but we're going to run through some information on political parties and see if we can finish up this chapter. And then next time we'll get into elections. So we'll finish up political parties today by talking about third parties, and then we'll get into elections during our next class. So you should have an outline either physically or on Canvas. If you weren't here last time, you should be able to pick up an outline from the front of the room, but you should be following along. So last time we finished up by talking about the Electoral College, and today we're going to start by talking about third parties. So we do have our two major parties. Pretty much through all of American history, there have been two major political parties. As we talked about last time, they haven't always been the Democrats and the Republicans, but we basically always have two major political parties, but there are other ones. There can be third parties, and certainly there are. So we'll talk about a few different types, and I'll give you some examples as we go. One type of third parties are called splinter parties. A splinter party is one that splits off from one of the two major political parties. So people get annoyed, they get disgruntled with the two main political parties, so they leave and they make their own. That's a splinter party. The most famous example of a splinter party would be the Progressive Party, also called the Bull Moose Party. It was led by the former Republican president, Teddy Roosevelt, when he tried to run again against his old friend, William Howard Taft, in 1912. The Republicans wouldn't nominate him again, so he formed his own party, which he called the Progressive Party. It got nicknamed the Bull Moose Party, and he took a bunch of votes from Republicans, and so the Republicans and the Progressives split, and Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat, was able to win. So a splinter party breaks off from one of the two major political parties and usually spoils for one of the two big parties. Another type of third party is called an ideological party. These ones tend to stick around for the longest, even though they're not super successful. They do exist. Think of the American Communist Party. That is a real thing. It does exist. They don't usually win many elections at any level of government, but they do exist, and they have their own ideological stances on every issue, and they do try to run candidates for office. So an ideological party, they've got stances, they've got a platform, just like the two big ones. They just don't tend to get as much support. And so we will talk on the next slide about why third parties struggle, and we'll get into why these ideological parties have a hard time. But they do exist, they are real. They've got the most well thought out, fully fleshed out platforms of any of these different types of third parties. A single issue party is exactly what it sounds like. A single issue party is they only really care about one thing. So they don't have a fully formed platform. They just have one issue that they're concerned about. Back during the early 20th century, there was a prohibition party, and their one goal was amending the Constitution to put prohibition in place. And it worked for a short amount of time. So a single issue party, they form around one issue and then they usually go away. An economic protest party forms in bad economic times during recessions or depressions. You'll see these economic protest parties kind of burst onto the scene like the Populist Party, where they typically are favoring radical economic change. They get a lot of people who are badly affected by the faltering economy, and they kind of whip them up into a frenzy, get them to join. And then typically when economic times get better, these economic protest parties then go away. So why are we stuck with this two-party system? Why can't third parties win elections? We'll talk about a few reasons. A big one that is also difficult to understand is this top bullet. Most of our elections in the United States are conducted under what's called a winner-take-all system. If you study comparative economics, you study the British system, they call this first past the post. What it means is that most of our elections, uh, all you need is the most votes to win. So you can set aside the presidency, that's a little bit different. But in most of our elections, the person who gets the most votes is the one who wins. Uh, so, for that reason, let's say you have 5 candidates running for office, it would be possible to win, to get the most votes among those 5 candidates with actually a very small percentage of the vote. You don't need a majority, you just need a small percentage. And so, for that reason, a lot of candidates will tend to think what's called tactically. They will try to look at the polls and look at all the candidates running, and they will consider um, which of these candidates can I live with who actually has a shot at winning. One of the reasons that third parties struggle is because people don't believe that third party candidates can win. And so they either find the Republican or the Democrat and they say, well, one of these two is going to win. Let me vote for the one of those two that I can live with, instead of voting for a third party candidate that I know is going to lose, even though they might be politically closer to me. So, because all you need is the most votes, it incentivizes voters to try to choose someone that they know has a shot of winning. We also have in the United States what are called single member districts. Again, take the presidency out of this for the moment and just think about the House of Representatives. In Virginia, we have 11 congressional districts. So you can see the map of 11 Virginia congressional districts here. Each one of these districts elects one person. Whoever gets the most votes in that district becomes the representative. And if you come in second, or if you come in third, or fourth, or fifth, you lose, you get nothing. Good day, sir. So only electing one person from each district, and it's the person who just gets the most votes, it tends to funnel our system towards the two main political parties running against each other. Um, the way it helps me to think about this would be if we did it differently, if we had multi member districts. Let's say we elected 12 members of the House from Virginia. We only get 11, but let's call it 12 so that we can remember. Um, if we split Virginia into 3 districts that each elected 4 members, so it would be the top 4 vote getters would all get to go to Congress in each of those 3 districts. That would give us 12 representatives, but there would be some kind of incentive for people to vote for someone, even if they weren't going to come in first, right? They might vote for a person who might come in second or third or fourth, because those people still get to go to Congress. That would help third parties do better. But we don't do it that way. We split states into single member districts. So each of these districts only sends one person, and it's the one person who gets the most votes. And because of that, third parties tend to struggle. The two major political parties have big party structures already in place at the national, state, and local levels. They're able to get signatures, get their candidates on ballots, help with fundraising, and that leads us nicely into campaign financing. Um, if you donate to a candidate and that candidate loses, you don't get anything in return. You might as well have set your money on fire, because at least then it would have kept you warm. So you get nothing. That incentivizes people to only donate to candidates, again, that they think have a shot at winning. So people donate to the two major political parties because they think one of those is going to win. They don't think third parties have a prayer, so they don't donate to them. There is a system in place to help offset the cost of presidential elections. Uh, Presidential candidates can qualify for the federal government to basically reimburse them for running for president. If you, in an election, if your political party is able to get a certain percentage of the votes and raise a certain amount of money, your campaign can then get additional funding for future elections. The idea there was to help third parties, but it's a very high bar that ends up making it almost impossible. Uh, Most of the time, even third parties don't meet the bar that they would need to in order to qualify to get money from the government to kind of give them a little boost to help them along. So the bar is too high. They do not meet that standard of support in order to get those federal matching funds. And the two big political parties don't use this money anyway. There's fundraising restrictions that you have to accept if you take this money, and those two political parties don't want to accept it. So basically, no one benefits from the fact that these matching funds exist. The bar is too low for the big political parties, and it's too high for third parties. Name recognition. You may not know this guy's name. He ran for president back in 2016. His name is Gary Johnson. He ran on the Libertarian Party platform. Jill Stein ran in 2016 for the Green Party, but most people can't remember those names. So people don't know them. You don't tend to see their ads on TV, so you're unlikely to vote for them. Name recognition is a pretty straightforward one. And the Electoral College, it's been a long time since a third party candidate won any Electoral College votes. And the best showing for a third party candidate came with Teddy Roosevelt in 1912. He actually came in second. He beat Taft, the Republican, but most of the time, Republicans are red on the map, Democrats are blue. We have no idea what color third parties would be because we don't really need to use it. So the Electoral College makes it seem like they get 0 votes. Even though every election, third party candidates get thousands of votes, they get 0 electoral votes. And so it seems like they just don't exist. This is a reminder that elections take place at every level of government. So the 2020 Electoral College map is down here in the bottom right, but up in the top left is state government maps. So which party controls state governments? States that are red have full Republican control. States that are blue have full Democratic control. But states that are purple have split control. So you can see Virginia, even though Virginia voted for Joe Biden, has split control. Republicans control the House of Delegates and the governor, but Democrats control the Virginia Senate. North Carolina is red. It voted for Donald Trump in 2020, but it has a Democratic governor. Maryland is blue, voted for Joe Biden, but has a Republican governor. And so elections take place at every level. Just because you lose at the national level, you can still win at the state level and affect policy there. So this is basically what I just said. Elections happen at every level of government, and the political parties are active at every level of government. They're active nationally for sure, but they're also active at state and local levels. So just because you've lost the presidency, you can still make gains at the state level in state legislatures and governor races. People's loyalty is most pronounced to their political party at the national level. If someone identifies as a Democrat, it doesn't mean that they'll never vote for a Republican at the state level. So as you move down that federalism line, that vertical line, you might see people who split their vote. They were willing to vote for a Democrat for president and a Democrat for Senate, but also a Republican for governor or for their state legislature. So people's loyalty is more pronounced at the national level, but it gets a little looser as you go down the federalism line. And I kind of mentioned this before. There is a national party organization at every level. There's also state parties and local parties that are all kind of loosely affiliated. There's lots of independence between these different levels. It's not like every Republican follows the National Republican Party, and they're tightly controlled. There's a Virginia Republican Party that has different priorities than the Texas Republican Party. So quick structure, the parties are led by a party committee. They have a person who leads that committee called the party chair. And I believe we've talked about this some, and we'll continue when we get to our elections chapter. But when Parties are nominating candidates for office. Remember, that's one of the big functions of a political party, is to nominate candidates for office. The way that parties tend to do that in the modern era is with what are called either primaries or caucuses. So they use what are called either primaries or caucuses. You may have heard of this, like you may have heard of the Iowa caucuses, or you may have heard of primary elections. The idea of things, primaries and caucuses, is to have different candidates from the same political party all run against each other. So if you think back to the 2020 election, when so many Democrats were running against each other for president, you had Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and so on and so on. They were running in presidential primaries, a bunch of Democrats all running against each other to see who would be the candidate for president. So we'll get into some differences here. We'll talk about two different flavors of primaries. You can have an open primary where anybody can vote in it, or you can have a closed primary where you have to be a registered party member in order to participate. Registering as a party member doesn't cost you anything. You just have to give them your name and tell them, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, whatever, and probably sign up for an email list or something like that. But anybody can participate in an open primary. Only party members can participate in a closed primary. And primaries are what we do in Virginia. They feel like a normal election. You go to your polling place, you get a ballot. The only difference is only people from one political party will be on that ballot. So let's say in 2024, you're going to vote in the Virginia Republican primary for president. You might get a ballot with just Republican names on it. So it'll be like Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Kristi Noem. Let's see, who else is running for president? Mike Pence, Mike Pompeo. And you're going to bubble in one of those names, put it in the Scantron, and then you're done. So a primary feels like a normal election, but you're just voting between candidates of one party. A caucus is different. The word caucus means meeting. So you are attending a local party meeting. So you have to gather together at a certain time. Can't start until after people have gotten off of work. So it's going to be late into the night. Typically, you're hearing speeches from representatives representing the different campaigns. And these caucuses can take hours. So participation in them is much lower than in a primary. Only the most committed people are going to a caucus. The result is the same. So you are still having people from you still got candidates from just one political party, and you're trying to narrow down and choose one candidate from your party. Who do we want to represent us in the actual election in November? So primaries and caucuses happen earlier in the year. You're choosing one candidate to represent you in the general election in November. We talk a lot about primaries and caucuses with the presidential election. I've talked about the Democrats in 2020, talked about Republicans in 2024. States like for their primaries to be sooner. If you're the last primary to go in the calendar, chances are good the decision has already been made and no one is going to pay attention to you. So lots of states have been front loading. They've been moving their primaries and caucuses earlier and earlier in the calendar, so that soon, we'll be having primaries and caucuses in January or February of 2024. It's going to happen earlier and earlier. And you can look at this map. The red states on the map went first. So Iowa has traditionally been the first caucus, New Hampshire the first primary, and then Nevada, South Carolina, and then all the states in blue all held theirs on the same day. That was called Super Tuesday. If you are running for Senate or House of Representatives, you just need to win your primary and then boom, you're the candidate. So if you're running for one of those smaller offices, again, you just win your primary or you win your caucus and that's it. If you're running for president, of course, it's going to get more complicated. When you win a primary or you win a caucus for president, what you actually win are delegates. You win people. You win the support of delegates who pledge to vote for you at your party's national convention. So I'm going to jump down here and talk about conventions real quick. Every 4 years, the major political parties hold these big conventions where they talk about how great it is to be a Republican or how great it is to be a Democrat, and they nominate their candidates to be president and vice president. The people who nominate those candidates are called delegates, and you win the support of delegates by winning primaries and caucuses. It is a very confusing system that has evolved, like many things, sort of by accident over time. So you can see the numbers on this map. That's how many delegates you could win by winning the primary or the caucus in each of these states if you were a 2020 Democratic candidate. It's confusing. It goes by population. It would be nice if it was the same as the Electoral College, but the numbers are different. The key is that winning or doing well in a primary earns you delegates, and if you have a majority of the delegates, you become your party's candidate. Democrats do proportional delegate allocation, where you don't have to get the most votes. They split it up by what percentage of the election you won. That can drag it out. Republicans split their delegates up winner take all. So whoever gets the most votes in a state gets all of that state's delegates. And then again, whoever has a majority of the delegates going into the convention will be the nominee. A lot of times we'll talk about candidates pivoting during the election. So to win primaries and win caucuses, you have to win your most committed voters. Democrats have to win their most liberal voters. Republicans have to win their most conservative voters, because those are the people who vote in primaries and caucuses. But to win a real election, you need to win independents and moderates and people in the middle. So candidates will go far to the left or far to the right to win primaries, and then they will pivot and turn towards the center to win the general election. So that's what that word pivot means. Suddenly, they will turn and try to be a uniter, try to be more moderate in order to win the general election. I mentioned conventions already. Delegates are the people who support you win. When you win primaries, they vote for you to make you the candidate. Democrats in the past have used what are called super delegates, who aren't bound by the results of primary elections. They get to vote their conscience. Typically, these are Democratic Party leaders, and they are there to represent sort of the elite of the party itself. Republicans do not use superdelegates, only Democrats do. They aren't bound by the results of primaries the way normal delegates are. They can just vote their conscience. So this is way into the weeds of getting people nominated for presidential candidates. If you have questions or you want me to review this when I'm back in class, please let me know, because I know that this in particular is very confusing. But it's, the way we nominate candidates for the highest office in the land. So that's great. Last thing, Republicans have been labeled with the elephant and Democrats with the donkey ever since the drawings of cartoonist Thomas Nast. He made these analogies where he compared Republicans to elephants and Democrats to donkeys, and he kind of popularized both of those, and now we're stuck with them forever. So if you've ever wondered why elephants and donkeys, that's why. So I think that's all for today. Nope, just kidding. A little bit of extra stuff. Local elections tend to not have party labels. So if you're voting for Senate or House of Delegates, you're going to see a letter D or a letter R representing Democrat or Republican. But at city council level, school board level, those are nonpartisan. You don't have party affiliations there. Patronage is, we've talked about before, awarding political favors in return for support getting elected. So you promise someone a job in return for their help. We're going to cover types of elections in our next chapter. We're going to do this later on, so I'm going to skip that for now. And just understand that elections are shifting. People used to primarily be loyal to their party and would go along with whatever candidate the party nominated. In the modern era, people are more loyal to the people and they kind of put up with the party. So elections have become more candidate-centered instead of being party-centered. Now that's all for today, and we'll get into nominations, campaigns, and elections next time. You have something on Canvas to work on. I'm sorry again that I couldn't be with you today, but I will see you next time.